One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast and another amazing episode. As you know, I am your friendly neighborhood podcast host. I'm the founder of Revenue Collective. We are increasingly all over the world today, which is it's May 28th when I'm recording this. We had conversations with people in Berlin and with Tel Aviv. So we are excited about our global growth. But if you want to learn more about Revenue Collective, reach out to me. And then, of course, we want to hear from our sponsors. Now, today on the show, we've got Ben Wright, the Chief Revenue Officer of Eat Club. Eat Club is a meal delivery platform, maybe an eating platform. I'm not sure exactly the category that they would use, but it's a really incredible company serving millions and millions of people and meals, food, every single year, and they're growing really quickly. They're well past 100 million in total revenue. So it's, or annual revenue. Total revenue would imply that I'm just adding up all of the years they've been in existence. That's not what I mean. I mean that in any given 1 year, they are achieving more than 100 million, which is fantastic. And Ben's going to talk to us about the lessons that he's learned moving from a big company at Yahoo and IAC to a small company and how he translates big company lessons to small companies. So it's a great conversation. Now, we want to dive in and we want to thank our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Conga. Conga is the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite. With Conga, you can simplify documents, automate contracts, and execute e-signature so you can focus on accelerating sales cycles and closing business faster. Go to go.conga.com/saleshacker for more information. And our second sponsor is Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform, the definers of the sales engagement category. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communication at scale, from automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best. Outreach has your back. Now let's listen to Ben Wright from Eat Club. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We have a great show for you today. Today on the show, we have Ben Wright, the Chief Revenue Officer at Eat Club. Eat Club is one of the faster growing high growth companies out there. They are past the $100 million run rate mark, or will be at the end of the year. So they're growing very, very quickly. Ben has over 20 years of experience leading sales teams, strategy teams, and operations at both big companies and small companies. He spent 10 years at Yahoo, but he's also spent time building companies from very, very early stage. So he's got both big company and small company experience. He's an incredible sales leader. Ben, welcome to the show.
Sam, great to be here. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
We're excited to have you. So as we like to do, we like to get your baseball card. We like to contextualize your experience. So we know your name, Ben Wright. We know your title, Chief Revenue Officer. What we don't know is, what does Eat Club do? Tell us about Eat Club, the company where you are CRO.
Yeah, great question. So I've been here for almost a year. In fact, almost exactly a year. Eat Club's a food tech platform focused on the B2B space. So we're focused on bringing amazing food experiences into the office, right, into the corporate experience at scale. And what that really means for us is, great companies know that providing lunch as a benefit is one of the best ways to increase collaboration, improve culture, boost productivity with the employee base. And if you think about that, the standard options to do that, first and foremostly, people think about cafeterias, right? Especially here in the Bay Area. Well, that's great if you're, a Google or a Facebook or a, bajillion-dollar company. You have, thousands of folks in a corporate campus. Cafeteria might well make sense, but they're expensive. They're a logistical headache. And again, they work when you've got a ton of scale, but not everybody is yet a bajillion-dollar company, right? So the other options that leaves you with is traditional family-style catering. Think about what that looks like when you got a couple hundred employees, folks waiting in long lines for food that they didn't order and perhaps doesn't work with dietary restrictions or allergy concerns they may have. Or then there's the individual ordering from consumer apps, which gets to be a bit of a mess when everybody's ordering, from disparate places, and you get tons of delivery drivers showing up over the course of a typical 60 to 90 minute lunch period. So that's where Eat Club comes in. We're a virtual cafeteria. What I mean by that is we've solved the problems I just described by letting employees order individual meal choices from a mobile app. They'll see about 30 dishes a day, over 100 unique dishes a week, and everybody gets to order their own meal and choose what they want to eat. And because of that, we satisfy all tastes, we satisfy all dietary restrictions. The employee can order lunch up to a week in advance or as late as 10 a.m. the same day. And then the food all arrives together at lunchtime, brought by our delivery drivers, put into our racks. All the employees get a notification to their phone, letting them know exactly where their food is and that it's just arrived. And folks can very quickly get in, grab their food, and either hang out and eat as a group or in small groups and talk and discuss and meet people they may not know. Or if they need to head back to their desk, it's an efficient way for them to do that. And so we've been around since 2010. Like I said, I've been here for just over a year. We've served 18 million meals to great companies in the Bay Area and LA, which is the two markets that we're in as of right now. This year, we're on pace to do about 6 million meals. So you can imagine that as part of that total 18, we're in some pretty rapid growth mode. So that's what eClub is.
That's a lot of meals. I have a few follow-up questions if it's okay. One of them is is it completely subsidized by the company, or do you figure that out as part of the sale? What portion the employees pay versus the company? How do the economics work?
Yeah, great question. So, from a sales perspective, we're selling into the company, as you might imagine, right? So it's not a B2C app, it's very much business to business. So we're selling into the company. That detail is part of what we'll work out in the sales process, but I will tell you the vast, vast, vast majority of our customers here in the Bay Area and Los Angeles fully subsidize the meals for their employee base. Again, this is, I benefit from, this business benefits from, and probably why it began here in the Bay Area. There's definitely a culture here with some really awesome progressive companies thinking about food as a benefit, not just purely from sort of a dollars and cents productivity perspective, although it is, but really, that sort of lifestyle benefit, that ability to, give people an amenity that lets them just have one less thing to worry about and also engage a lot with their coworkers, which we do at work in the same way we do in our personal lives. And so the companies are really trying to foster and further that particular aspect.
Makes sense. My last question is: is it your kitchens that are preparing the food, or is it sourced through restaurants? How does the food preparation come into play?
Yeah, another great question. So, a little over half of the food that we take out on any given day, 20,000+ meals at this point, a little over half of that food we make ourselves in our own kitchen. Okay? We'll then work with local restaurant partners to help fill what we would describe as menu gaps. So in particular areas, there may be more call for hot vegan, hot vegetarian food, for example. Some of that we'll prepare ourselves, particular dishes that we'd love to be able to take out to folks. We will work with amazing restaurant partners to help meet that particular demand. Some of those dishes that are more tricky or perhaps more sort of ethnic or specific in nature, those are great candidates to work with local restaurant partners. And so that combination of both our in-house as well as working with restaurant partners where it makes sense to do so is part of what lets us be really, really scalable and still provide that high-quality food experience at the type of scale that I just described. It's actually the logistics and the operations, which I have entirely zero to do with, are really like an amazing thing here in our business.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like anytime food and food preparation comes into play, logistics of sourcing and preparation and delivery are going to be perhaps one of the more fundamental aspects that need to get figured out. So eClub has raised about $46 million. Is that right?
Yep.
And how large is your team?
So my team, let me tell you what my team consists of. I have all of our sales functions across Bay Area, LA, and then an enterprise team that we stood up about 6-7 months ago, having a ton of traction actually with some of those bigger companies who do have those full cafeterias. We're finding there's a good spot in our market or in the market for eClub to help there. We have an enterprise team, and then Bay Area, Los Angeles account executives, and then SDR teams in LA and the Bay Area. I also have our customer success functions. I also have our member services group, which you can think of as customer service responding to the individual eaters at our particular companies. that we serve, as opposed to my customer success team that will work directly with the master account holders, the people who manage the relationships. I also have a small sales ops function and demand gen marketing. So that's what I have.
Wow.
All in all, that's about 60 folks for us.
That's a good number of people. Is the sale typically, are you replacing an existing subsidized food program? Maybe it's like a corporate seamless membership or some other platform, or are you convincing companies that they should begin fully subsidizing their employees' lunch?
Yeah, we do both, I will say, and it sort of varies a little by region. So in the Bay Area, it tends to be a lot more vendor displacements, the first thing you described. They have lunch coming into the office. They've already figured out that that's a good thing for them to invest in. And then the question is, why Eat Club as opposed to what they're currently doing? We certainly see that in Los Angeles as well. Los Angeles tends to be a healthy number of new lunch programs where, to your point, first thing we got to do is explain to someone why great companies are starting to spend money on feeding their employees. And, that's sort of the first thing. And that can sometimes take a while. Right? That's a lot of insights driven sales approach there, and ultimately get to, the various ways you could choose to do this. Why do this with Eat Club?
Yeah, got it. Well, let's figure out how you arrived at this position. Tell us a little bit. We can hear an accent in your voice. So Tell us a little bit about your background and, the journey that you've been doing this. You've been working you've been working for 20 years, but you've been at Eat Club for just 1 year. So tell us about the evolution of your time to get here.
Yeah. So you can hear an accent. I'm not sure which accent you can hear at this point. So I'm originally from the UK, London specifically, and I came to America in 99, spent the first 13, 14 years or so in Southern California, and I think that is what started to completely pickle my accent to whatever it is right now, which I think is mostly Australian, depending on who you ask. So I was at Yahoo, joined there in 2000. Actually, it was a company called GoTo.com, which in an incredible strategic pivot became GoTo when we dropped the .com. Then that became Overture Services. For any sort of digital media geeks who go back a while, that was the original paid search company.
Yeah, Overture was where it's where Google stole search engine marketing from, isn't it?
So I'm not going to say that exactly, but I will tell you, I do remember the day walking into our office in Pasadena and somebody said, "Hey, Google?" I said, "Yeah, I know Google." I said, "Hey, they just said they're going to get into the paid search thing as well." And I remember, I think I probably said out loud, "Oh shit."
Sorry.
And yeah, if you want a case study in second mover advantage and a whole bunch of other stuff, yes. So we ended up getting acquired by Yahoo not long after that. And then all in that journey, that was about 10 years for me. Wow. From the start of GoTo till the time I left Yahoo. And I started as an individual contributor, sales guy. I actually joined because GoTo was launching its first international market, which was the UK, and we're absolutely convinced that they needed people with UK accents to help them do that, which at the time I still had. And they quickly figured out that wasn't the case, but that was fine for me because I was already in there, and that began my sales, and it was sort of a hybrid sales account management role at that time, and so I did well in that role. I was inquisitive and I asked lots of questions, such as really complex ones like, "Hey, what would success look like for you as a customer?" And that
genius question, Ben. Genius
right.
question.
Thank you. You're welcome. Everybody write that down. But it actually is interesting, right? Because, one of the first relationships I got was, it was a company that used to sell books and now sells everything. And they sat with us for a while, and lots of people had had a run up managing that business and hadn't grown it very much. It was a small account. And I just remember asking them, what would it take in order for you guys to spend lots of money? What would that success look like? How does your business work? And from that conversation, we sort of got to the concept of the cost per acquisition. which today is like, yes, of course, it's a cost per acquisition. Back then was kind of a new concept in digital media. And shortly that became one of our very largest accounts because we figured out actually what was important to them, which was acquiring new customers who hadn't ordered from them before. And we could figure out how to do that and optimize campaigns to do that. And that grew quickly to be a big account. That and a few others, I quickly got my own team, which was really my first step into management. And like a lot of other steps since, was kind of like, do that thing that you do, but try and show these other 5 or 6 people how to do it, and good luck, and we'll check back with you. And so that ultimately grew from a handful of customer service reps into, fast forward a couple years at Yahoo, and that was a large-ish sort of 20-odd person team that had really moved into being a sales team, and was about $400 million of revenue, which today, by sort of digital media standards, is not massive. At the time, I think was pretty large, going back to the early 2000s. And so
I think it's large, just to be clear.
I'd like it.
I don't want you to be too hard on yourself.
I'd like it. But it was really
it's the self-deprecating Brit that's coming out.
There you go. Yeah, no, I would like that. That would be nice. Still would be nice today. So grew a team, and a whole ton of stuff that sort of happened in there for me in my evolution as a manager. Started to figure out some of the things that I still, to this day, and have used since, as I've been, a recurring theme of sort of being the guy into a room without a ton of direction other than to go figure it out. And so a bunch of things I learned, chat up in a little bit, from that experience let me grow and scale. I then moved into more operational strategy roles in the sales organization. By the time I left Yahoo, I had about a 130-person team, and then headed off to do something completely different, which was a small startup with about 35 people total when I walked in the door in Boulder, Colorado, which was really a cool experience. Google Ventures funded company, really smart folks on the board, and it was a great opportunity to go in and really go from huge company to small company. Did not end up being a crushing home run, but I learned a ton. And, after 2 amazing years in amazing Colorado, headed back to the Bay Area to work with folks that I'd worked with in my time at Yahoo. And, this time from Southern California to the Bay, joined a company called IAC, which folks may be familiar with, owns a whole number of businesses from Vimeo to a lot of dating sites. I worked on the publishing division, really in strategy and operations, helping fire jump to particular projects, grow that out as we really became more acquisitive in that particular division, started adding companies, and really worked with the CEOs of those various groups to help them think about and operationalize various components of their business, focus on the revenue side, on the strategy side of things. So I did that up until a little less than a year ago, took some time off, and then joined eClub, like I said, about 12 months ago.
Well, it sounds like things are going well at eClub, and thank you for that history. One of the things that jumps out at me is sort of the time that you spent at Yahoo, and then you went to a 35-person organization backed by Google Ventures. Then you went to IAC. So you've been at big companies and you've been at small companies, and I would guess eClub is probably in the middle, given how quickly you're scaling. And your team is 60 people, so that's already bigger than the Google Ventures company. So when you think about, I think there's a lot of probably, I don't know, negative, maybe slightly negative, maybe some confusion around what is the value of working at a big company. But I think from your experience, there's been a lot of really good principles and lessons that you can apply from a quote unquote big company like a Yahoo in the early aughts that you might be able to bring to a very early stage company. So when you think about what the lessons are that you can apply from a big company to a small company, what emerges for you?
Good question. So look, I think the way I've come to think about it, and in part it wasn't sort of conscious from the outset, but as I look back, I realized that what I would describe as the light application of big company, I don't know whether it's principles or set of practices, there's a lot of value and a lot of discipline and a lot of smarts that exist at big companies, where some of the work that I had the opportunity to do, which was definitely big company work. Whilst the way you're going to go about doing it at a smaller company necessarily is going to have to be different, the principle or the thing you were trying to do absolutely could have application, probably does have application at a small company. So, I'll give you an example here. And by the way, just to be clear, when I say big company, what I'm not talking about is like big company bullshit. Like big company bullshit is just bullshit. Big company, small company.
What is big company bullshit?
Okay.
What do you mean by that?
Land grabbing, politics, people, empire building. Honestly, to me, look, everyone's going to come at it with a different perspective. For me, I have never had time, patience, or interest in that, which sounds, super heroic and not particularly controversial, right? But that's the type of thing that I have seen at big companies that just made me scratch my head and made me feel like life's too short to want to step over and trample on other people to be successful at this big company and have everybody just really think you're not a super awesome person. And I don't say that to mean like that is objectively true or objectively correct, but in sort of Ben Wright's opinion of things that suck and life's too short. And if you honestly find yourself in an environment where that is what is needed to be successful, I would tell people life's too short, move on. Right? Mostly because I find that you're probably not going to be, the company probably isn't going to be super successful if that's the prevailing culture anyway. And so, that's my, for what it's worth, one guy's opinion on big company bullshit. But there's good stuff at big companies. So I'll give you an example. A piece of work I did, this was more on the strategy side as I was thinking about scaling the sales organization at Yahoo, right? So, big companies think about nonlinear scale, right? How do you be in a position where you don't have to keep investing at a very linear rate in order to scale your sales team, your support team in particular is where that can come into place. And at a big company like Yahoo, that is a major spreadsheet operation with rows and columns of, take a particular function, right? That's one of the main ways you can do it, drive cost efficiency at a particular functional level. So take a role, an account manager role. Okay, what are all the various things that happen in the account manager role? Start to pull those things apart, start to really break out the various set of activities. And the point there is to say, well, not all of those activities have to be done by the same person. Some of those are easier, some of those require less experience, some of those can be done at a different time zone. And what you quickly end up with is the role that was called an account manager is now a matrix of things, of discrete functions that can all be done in different places at different cost bases, which is kind of the really key piece of that. Now, at the type of scale that a big company operates at, that can be really meaningful. You can squeeze out 7, 8, 10, 12 points of cost efficiency and you times that by hundreds of people doing the same function. You got something that's really impactful and will let the business scale in a nonlinear fashion, which is what we're hoping to do. You can't do that at a small company. That literally the infrastructure and the people, and honestly, even if you went through all of that exercise and you hired in people and consultants to help you push that through, you're probably not operating at the same level of scale where it's really impactful, and you've spent more money trying to do that than the benefit you'll see from that. However, the principle there is still an interesting thing that could have application at a small company, right? Where you can think about where I could be hiring. Does everybody need to be, in one particular location? Could I be more efficient there as I think about the long-term plan where, if I make it real for eClub, we're in the Bay Area in Los Angeles today, but I intend this to be in lots of other places soon. How do you think about, the nonlinear scaling of your team? Can you start to think about different activities being done by different groups of people as opposed to assuming everything needs to be done by a generic customer success manager? And so I think, for us, the answer is yes. And it starts with sort of a few people, or it starts with thinking about tweaking roles that might let you go hire, more a larger number of more junior people to do things that don't necessarily require the same level of experience as your existing highest performing customer success managers. Maybe that's at a lower cost basis. Maybe it doesn't need to be done in a location that's expensive, or where you're sort of running out of seats. And so that, to me, is just one example of how you take something that's big company, which is non-linear scale planning, and then think about actually applying that in a very light way to a smaller business that can actually process and absorb it.
So is the lesson really that not all process is bad, and that you can take some of the systems and processes that have been developed at big companies to make informed decisions on a very large base, and while you don't have to replicate all of them 100%, you can take the ideas behind those processes and bring them to a small company? Is that an accurate sort of interpretation?
Yes, that's exactly right. Or this is exactly what I think. And I think, as you do that, the key though is to realize, especially if you've been at a big company and you've seen this done at a big company, understand it's not going to work the same way. So what you're trying to distill is the principle of the thing, and then think about, as you're a leader of a team or a function, or even an individual contributor, think about the application, the lighter weight application of that thing to your particular environment. And for me, one of the things that I found is I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of folks who are first-time people managers or newer people managers, and so something that to me seems, I won't say obvious, but like a relatively simple concept, you might be explaining it to someone for the first time. And that's great. Like, actually, it's not just great. That's like the most fun thing to do from my experience, is where you get to bring these concepts. But if I sit there and try and explain this 8 tabs of a really complex spreadsheet, it's not only is not effective, it's just wrong. Like, it's just the wrong approach. So that to me is the thing. Not all process is bad. Picking and choosing what's right, drawing from your experience, but understanding that just because that's how it worked at a big company, not necessarily going to translate to a small company. And related to that, I'd also counsel suppress the urge to like bamboozle with complexity. Hey, I'm the smartest guy in the room and I'm the new boss and everybody welcome to me. Let me bamboozle you with a whole bunch of complexity just to prove how smart I am. Not good. It's just not effective. It's actually not fun. It doesn't make you look smart. But it's easy to do, especially if you're ripping from a playbook that you've run consistently at larger companies.
How do you determine if it's what the right level of simplicity or complexity is? What if you think that you're just presenting the right way to do it? How do you distill? What's a framework that you can use to simplify or just stress test against a degree of complexity that may be inappropriate?
I mean, so I guess another principle, begin with the end in mind. That is definitely not original to me, but when someone said it out loud at a training, I think it's a Stephen Covey thing, 7 Habits thing, that stuck with me. So that actually is the first lens I'd look at. What am I actually trying to accomplish here? Right? What are the parameters around which I'm trying to accomplish this thing? If I've got a team of 6 or 7 people, there's just not enough juice to be squeezed out of a really complex operation here, like a really complex set of operations to ultimately, go through. And I'm sort of going back to the example that I just gave. You're just not going to get the value out of a really complex operation when that is your operating base, 6 or 7 people. And so really thinking about what I'm trying to achieve here, the reason why I started saying this thing, or starting to provide this principle, was because I think we can do a little bit better, or maybe we need to hire a couple of people in a different place. Then I would start off with just that level of not very complex. Don't know. Don't have a perfect answer for that, or even perhaps a good answer for that. It's an interesting question.
Thanks. Well, then my work here is done. Is this the first time you're officially a chief revenue officer? Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
So tell me about, your first year. There's a lot of debate and a lot of conversation about, what is the difference between a VP of sales and a CRO, and what are the drivers of success and failure as a CRO? When you think about the last year, the learnings that you've developed, what the title implies, if anything, and how it relates to what your priorities are, what are the key lessons that you've learned that drive success as the Chief Revenue Officer at Eat Club?
So I think for me, instrumentation is really key. And I think, I've been, whether it's the Chief Revenue Officer here or other roles, where I've sort of been the just go in and, figure it out guy. To me, that is always, a couple of things. I just touched on one of them, begin with the end in mind. Do I have clarity of what success looks like in this scenario? Right. And I'll get to the measurement piece in a second, but the measurement has to be purpose towards something. And so for me, that's begin with the end in mind. What does success look like in this particular scenario? Do I know that? Is everybody aligned around that? And really for me, having a clear North Star of aligned expectations with the executive leadership team before I then go sort of blasting off on this journey. And by the way, that's not like a one-time thing. That is a thing to be constantly revisited. But as I start to sort of tease apart the differences between perhaps the Chief Revenue Officer role and more of a classic VP of sales role, part of it is the sort of the breadth of responsibility areas that I described earlier when I explained the things I'm responsible for. But it's also really that, like, not just hitting a number. Hitting a number is a piece of that for sure, but really sort of thinking about the broader architecting of what it is that we're setting out here to do as a company strategically, and do I have alignment on that? Can I then make sure that the more tactical things that I'm responsible for really are working in alignment with that? And so that's a lot about communication with the executive team for me, which I am both on that team, as well as sort of, I like to think of that as my audience, my constituents, as well, where I, keep myself honest and go report to them as my key clients as well. So clarity of mission, I think, is really sort of fundamentally important. And then get into the measurement piece, right? So once I know what it is I'm trying to achieve, am I instrumented to actually know what's happening? Not just are we hitting numbers, but what are the things that move in my world that ultimately, lead to success or not success? And for me, I think a lot about having a revenue machine. That's what I would like to have. And by the way, just huge caveat. Me saying these things is, what my experience has taught me. It does not mean that I do or have batted 1,000 on the execution of this, right? And some of this is learned in hindsight when I realized what I didn't have that I should have had in place, and I didn't get it in place quick enough, and so it made for some tough conversations or some misses. And now going back, I now know what I need to do, and sort of is the lens that I look through. But I aspire to have a machine. That means, when I say machine, I mean highly predictable set of inputs that get you a highly predictable output. If you have that, then you have something that's investable, right? Whether it's, at the board level investable, or it's like, hey, I need extra heads to go do this thing, or I need more budget to go do that thing. And so in order to truly know if you have a machine, you have to be instrumented. You have to know and understand how, the deal moves through the system, what a rep needs to have in terms of pipeline coverage in order for us to hit the number at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter. And really building that instrumentation for me has been a key component to success. And by the way, early on, taking a couple of hits, because I realized then, in hindsight, that I didn't have that instrumentation in place. Right?
Are there KPIs that you're measuring now that are surprising to you, that are indicative of success? Or, are there certain metrics that emerged, or is everything as you imagined? It's just that you needed to make sure that you measured it, like pipeline coverage, quota attainment, things like that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot about triangulation because any one metric I found. I mean, other than the ultimate metric of truth, like did you hit your number?
Revenue.
Right.
Right.
Revenue. Other than that, I
That is
find
the
like
ultimate metric.
yeah, it kind of sort of is, but there's a lot that goes into it, and knowing why something happened is really critical. So I'll give you an example, right? Hey, we hit the number. That's awesome. Do you know why you hit the number? No, I have no idea why we hit the number. Great. So how do I, as a board member, as a CEO, how do I have confidence you're going to hit the number again next month or next quarter? Is this a thing that I can invest in? That is, to me, is a really, really critical component. Do you actually understand what's happening? I hit the number, but I don't know why is not much better than I didn't hit the number. I don't know why.
That's
But in
certainly
terms of
true.
metrics, so you asked, let me give you an example. I see this one's recent triangulation, right? So you think, hey, activity is really important, call volume. It's old school, but it's still important. It's a mistake we make if we don't make enough calls. So I have a situation where real life here, one of my SDRs makes over 2 times as many calls as the other SDR, except the other SDR who's making fewer calls, setting twice as many meetings. There's something really interesting there. So having that sort of level of instrumentation, triangulating on KPIs, both of which are really important, helps to give us an operational learning, right? And then it's great to be enabled by something like Gong, which we have here, and I know that there's other solutions out there in the marketplace. Really, really interested to then be able to go back and actually listen at a level of detail to what's happening on those calls, because you start to then realize some of the real world things that are happening in the system, and thus the things you might want to actually optimize and share, right? And say, hey, let's listen to this call. This is a higher quality call. This is more qualified. We're doing a better job of qualifying the prospect here. And actually, let's sort of tease apart what's happening mechanically in this call. It becomes a great way of learning and helping the whole team get better. But it starts because you're looking at all of these KPIs, putting them together, and really starting to see what's moving and what's actually moving the needle in a positive way.
Do you have a favorite set of KPIs? Is it maybe activity to like conversion ratios on activity, as you mentioned, or things that you think are really indicative of future performance?
Yeah. So time to move deals through the various stages of our funnel is a thing that I'm finding really interesting right now. And why I thought we had that pretty well known and understood. And then I've sort of run into some things recently where I realized that it wasn't as good or as robust as I needed it to be. And so we're actually doing a deeper segmentation of our various deal stages to really start to tease that apart, because that to me is seeing how things flow through the funnel and start to get to some level of understanding and ultimately standardization around those metrics, to me is sort of a critical component. So that's something that I'm particularly into right now, which when said out loud, I understand sounds so blindingly obvious, but it was just sort of this recognition that I wasn't as well instrumented as I needed to be. We weren't as granular in terms of deal stages as I wanted to be. And so things were sort of staying fairly stagnant in a couple of our deal stages, and I wasn't seeing movement, and I couldn't understand why. And I realized I was just looking at it far too much of a big general course level. And so going more granular on deal stages is a thing that I'm into right now.
Interesting. Yeah. We always used to have a stage at the, whether it's the demo or whatever you call like the, confirmation of value conversation that happens after the discovery call. And at that point, especially in a more transactional sale, the salesperson's, a lot of their efforts are kind of complete, but the prospect hasn't quite made a decision, or may not have made a decision, or may not be convinced. And so, like the post demo stage, was always like a catch-all where things would just collect dust. And, the reps wouldn't want to close the deal because they felt like there's still an opportunity to get back in touch with the people.
Yep.
But there wasn't an immediate call to action besides, hey, do you want to buy this thing or not?
Yep. So that, let's go with that, Sam. Like that's exactly it. And that's what we've been seeing here, right? Where stuff will sit. I don't want to call it closed lost, I'm just going to keep it here, and I'm going to put it back to nurture. In fact, I'm sort of nurturing myself. I'm running sequences against it. But I was just sort of missing a whole lot of visibility. And so we've just sort of gone back and refactored more granular stages that let me know and understand when stuff's just sitting, and I can see week by week, movement, number of deals, and actually even what deals are moving at the rep level, rolled up to the region level, rolled up to my overall team level, so I can dive into it at different levels of granularity. But it's another really good illustration of that principle of the, from my sort of book of terrible cliches, that which is measured is managed, right? So you've got a whole sort of chunk of stuff that's sitting there, not being measured at a granular level, and thus not necessarily being managed. I don't want to say it's not at all managed. It's not like my sales directors aren't sitting there having some of those conversations, but there's just this very real forcing function around, knowing and understanding that. And then, my questions will now get to that next level of granularity. Okay, that's interesting. When I look at rep A versus rep B, I can see stuff's moving through rep A's pipeline. Rep B, I can see that only 2 new opportunities have even come in the top of that pipeline. We're not self-prospecting stuff, and things are not moving through what's going on there. And so knowing and understanding that those are the questions that I will have means that over time those questions sort of get asked and answered before they get to me, and lo and behold, things start sort of shaking loose and moving through the funnel. And again, if you start to know and understand and can recognize differences in behavior rep by rep, you can actually, as a sales director, get to an even more granular level. Let me go into Gong. Let me see how much time is being spent on next steps, for example. In a call, do I see a discernible difference here between reps that are able to progress things through the funnel, even if that's the close lost, versus reps where it just tends to sit?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Ben, we're approaching the end of our time together. This is the part, as a loyal listener, you will know, when we like to pay it forward and pay homage to either great leaders, great coaches, great salespeople that have influenced us or that we look up to. So when you think about some of those folks, could be a book that you've read recently, could be a great podcast, or could just be somebody that's been really influential in your life. Who are some of the names that come to mind?
Wow. Early on in my career at Yahoo, there's a sales leader, a guy called David Constead here in the Bay Area, who was brought in to lead our revenue organization, I think when we were still Overture, and ended up being running sales at Yahoo. He was, for me, a great example of the type of leader that I wanted to be. He also was one of those folks who took a personal interest in my career. And I've since come to find out lots of other people felt that same way. So he did as a busy guy, did an amazing job of working with people earlier on in their career, making them feel understood, special, encouraged them, helped through situations, provided just like a real level of personal interest. And I think when you get that early on from an executive, that's incredibly sort of empowering and encouraging. And so he, for me, as well as just sort of personified good communication, calm disposition, smart guy, good sales guy, but just sort of good human being, good leader that I looked up to and wanted to model myself after sort of early on. That's the kind of leader that I would like to be one day. In fact, he was probably the guy that had me start to think about, yes, I'd like to be a leader. I'd like to manage people and ultimately lead teams if I can do it.
That's fantastic. What's this guy's name again?
David Constead.
David Constead. Awesome.
Yep.
Any others before we go?
I've been lucky, and I'd be remiss if I didn't call out our current CEO here at eClub, which is going to sound incredibly self-serving. Perhaps it is a little bit, but Doug Leeds is a guy that I've worked with for years and years, and actually went back to IAC for my time in Colorado to go work with. And so when he came to take over eClub as the CEO, that was easy for me to, look at this as an interesting opportunity to come work with. His trait, again, good human, fun, good sense of humor, upbeat, very, very smart, very strategic, but keeps it light, keeps it moving, asks a bunch of questions. Ex-lawyer, and so that's good. It sort of keeps me on my toes, and ultimately sort of forces that discipline. I know if I got to go talk to him about something, I have to go show him some numbers. I need to sort of, and this is actually sort of how I think about board stuff as well. I like to look at what I'm about to go say, and I want to ask myself the questions that I expect that they're going to ask me, which kind of sort of sounds obvious, but it actually requires some discipline to sit there, look at the numbers, literally flip around the other side of the table, ask myself the questions, flip back around the other side of the table, and see if I can even answer those sensible questions. Do I actually know why something's happening? Not just can I tell them what's happening? Do I know and understand why? And if I don't, probably the first thing I got to do is go back and look at my instrumentation and realize that I'm not, instrumented like I need to be to really know and understand what's happening.
Makes sense. Ben, there's folks out there that are listening that are probably pretty interested in eClub, especially given what you're doing and the rate of growth. If folks want to reach out to you, what's your preferred method of outreach?
Well, folks can get me on LinkedIn for sure. Actually, I think I'm Ben Wright 11 on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Ben Wright who's the Chief Revenue Officer at eClub, at least as of right now. So they can find me on that, or I'm at ben.wright@eclub.com, and I would love to hear from folks in the Bay or LA around eClub, and just folks in general, folks who are practitioners in the sales and the revenue space. Account executives in the Bay Area, love to hear from those in particular, but just good to have that connectivity in our industry for sure.
Wonderful. Ben, thanks so much for being on the Sales Hacker podcast. We'll talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Sam.
Hey folks, Sam Jacobs. Welcome to Sam's Corner. Fantastic interview with Ben Wright, Chief Revenue Officer of eClub, which is scaling incredibly quickly, serving millions of meals to employees all over the world and all over the country. So it's exciting to see that growth. Ben talked about the transitions. He worked at Yahoo, which was obviously a very big company. He managed a $400 million book of business. He's also worked at very small companies. And so he talked about some of the transitions and specifically some of the expectations around becoming a C-level executive at a growth company and sort of how to think about it. And a couple key points that he made that bear some repetition. One of them is what is measured is managed. And so instrumentation and understanding data is really important. And I think that's somewhat obvious, but he talked about some of the non-obvious factors emerging to the top as sort of key metrics to be thinking about. So for him, it was how long each deal is staying in a specific sales stage within the sales cycle, and that length of time in a specific stage being a clear indicator of whether there's a problem with the deal or whether things are moving very quickly and effectively. And so it's more than just number of leads, pipeline coverage, total dollar size of the pipeline, but it's the second layer of data that you really want to understand about the performance of your sales funnel in order to properly manage and execute it. And that's important because one of his other key points is if you can't explain why the revenue machine is working, then the results themselves don't really matter, which is a way of saying, as we've all seen and experienced, if you have that one big whale of a deal that comes in right on the last day of the quarter, and that's the thing when you look at the bar graph that makes it seem like a very smooth, logical growth sequence. But we all know in the back of our minds that it was that one deal, and without that deal, things would have looked very differently. Those are the kinds of red flags that it's not just about hitting the number, it's about understanding why. Why is the machine working? Where is the predictability? And I think one of the things that he also mentioned is predictability is so important because it's fundable and investable, right? So when you're thinking about what kinds of companies generate equity value and enterprise value, think about that level of predictability. Can we reasonably predict what's going to happen? Of course, that's important in public companies, but it's also important the bigger you get at a private company, the more it's about how much can we rely on this particular machine that we've created, this money machine or value delivery machine, which is what a company is. How much can we rely on this machine to reasonably and predictably and reliably deliver a set of outputs when we deliver the similar and consistent set of inputs? Something to really think about. And then finally, again, related to this notion of what does it take to be a CRO and what are the key responsibilities when it comes to being a senior executive. It's not just about hitting the number. Ben said that time and time again. It's not just about explaining why the number was hit. It's about developing relationships with your peers. Your first team is the executive team, and you have to be able to influence other people that don't report to you. And to do that, you need to be an effective communicator, and it helps to be aligned culturally so that your behavior isn't viewed as being an asshole, and so that you can act in a manner that aligns you with the rest of your executive peers, and where you're not constantly creating false adversarial relationships between you and other people. Also true regardless of where you are in the organization. You don't just have to be a C-level executive to understand that how other people in the organization that are not in your department feel about you and think about you and experience working with you is a key driver of your long-term success. So this has been Sam's Corner. As you know, we of course want to thank our sponsors. Those sponsors are Outreach, which is the leading sales engagement platform, and Conga, the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite. So thanks for listening. If you want to reach out to me, it's linkedin.com/Sam F. Jacobs. Please give 5-star rating to our little podcast anywhere that you're presented with the opportunity, but especially on iTunes, and tell all of your friends about it. Thanks for listening.